Hello friends, welcome back to another Isaiah video, Isaiah chapter 3. And I just want to recap the previous couple chapters. So chapter 1, Isaiah sees a vision. In this vision, he sees God judging Israel. And the reason why he's judging Israel is because they are sick in their minds. We saw the image of a body from head to toe about how sick Israel is, and God is judging them. But the good thing is God never leaves us on a negative note. And God promises through the atonement of Jesus Christ that our sins as scarlet could become white as snow. And it's such a powerful chapter. Just telling us that God does care about us, even though how sick in our minds we are. We can always repent and come back to God. And then in chapter 2, we talked about people love to worship false idols. They love to worship the things with their own hands. And in that chapter, those things are not going to save us in the last days when the day of the Lord comes. Yeah, our false idols are just going to leave us in the dust. Only God and worshiping God can save us. And that is what we learn in Isaiah chapter 2. So now we're going to move on to Isaiah chapter 3. And it's going to kind of continue these themes about being proud, being wicked, being haughty. We'll see that term in here, and I'll explain what it means. And yeah, let's dive into it. So I'm going to go ahead and read the first 4 verses of chapter 3. For behold, the Lord of hosts, doth take away from Jerusalem and from Judah and the stay and the staff and the whole stay of bread and the whole stay of water, the mighty man and the man of war, the judge and the prophet and the prudent and the ancient, the captain of 50, and the honorable man, and the counselor, and the cunning artificer, and an eloquent orator. And I will give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them. Alright, so the very first verse, God just flat out puts out there that he'll take away things from us. He can, because he's God. He could take away things, and we see this throughout the scriptures, and we'll go over a couple of examples. And then verse 2 and 3, we see a whole bunch of jobs. So what do all these jobs have in common? They all have to do with power and talent and people who are the top in society. Like the mighty man, like powerful, the man of war, like a general. The judge, being a judge requires a lot of skill and talent and wisdom to get there. And then in verse 4, he goes on to say, he's going to give us children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them. That's an interesting. Why would God have the children become rulers over the skilled and the talented people? And this is a common theme throughout this chapter that we're to read is, yeah, God does give us children because there's a reason, and that the talented people, the skilled people, are just prideful. They want to do things their own way. They don't want to do things the way of God. And that's kind of what we take away from this these 4 verses. And so here's just a couple of highlights here. There's lots of examples. I want to share some of those with God using children to lead. And later on in Isaiah chapter 28, we're going to find out why God uses children to lead. And it's a very powerful chapter. But there has been many kings of Israel, such as Hezekiah, Amon, and Jehoiakim. They were all in their early 20s, and Manasseh was only 12, and Josiah was only 8 years old. And they all were called to be kings and prophets and leaders. You got these children. And in Isaiah chapter 28, one of the reasons why is when you have children, they're not warped up. They have not been as exposed to the culture as the adults have. God could take those kids and morph them into someone who he wants them to be. And another prominent example is Joseph Smith, the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He was only 14 years old when he received a vision from God to be a prophet. And the reason being is God could guide Joseph Smith throughout his years and kind of morph Joseph Smith into being the leader that he was. And so we see this theme here, and we're going to see this throughout all of Isaiah, because the lofty man must come to terms with their maker. And then verse 1, the Lord doth take away. The story of Job is the best one that comes to mind right now. In the story of Job, God took away his house, his land, his family, all his animals, all his wealth, even his health. He was so sick. Like the Lord can take away things from us. And, I mean, he is God. He can do it. And there's a reason why he does that. And also in Deuteronomy 28:25-45, we see the Lord talks about he will allow us to be spent in it for wicked. D&C 82, verse 3, for of him unto whom much is given, much is required, and he who sins against a greater light shall receive the greater condemnation. This is one of the reasons why the Lord takes away stuff from us. I watched Spider-Man No Way Home just recently, and there's this phrase that Spider-Man, throughout all the Spider-Man movies, says, with great power comes great responsibility. If we become favored of the Lord and we start deriving from the ways of the Lord, he could take away stuff from us just to try and humble us because we become so proud and lofty. And the Lord must have humble people. And it's up to us to choose if we want to be humble or if we want to be smitten and taken away from the Lord. But the Lord has his reasonings. He is the mastermind of everything in this life. Here is an example from Josephus. He was a Jewish author, and he was also a wartime leader back in the day. And he had this book, and he kind of talked about experiences that they went through. And so when the Lord took away from the mighty man, the man of war, and the judge, these could be seen as prophecies, and some of them were fulfilled in Babylon when Babylonians captured Jerusalem in 587 BC. This is what he described. The general Babylonian king now overthrew the city to the very foundations and removed all the people and took for prisoners the high priest Sariah and Zephaniah, the priest that was next to him, and the rulers and the that guarded the temple, who were 3 in number, and the eunuch who was over the armed men, and 7 friends of King Zedekiah, and his scribe, and 60 other rulers, all whom together with the vessels they had pillaged, he carried to the king of Babylon. Yeah, we see these very powerful people had no chance. The Lord is going to take away their power, their lifestyles, the things they love, their false idols they love to worship. And so that's Isaiah chapter 3, verses 1-4. And that's the main message that Isaiah tries to get away is stay humble, or else the Lord is going to send children to be our leaders. So we're going to move on to the next couple of verses. And the people shall be oppressed, everyone by another, and everyone by his neighbor. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient, and the base against the honorable. When a man shall take hold of his brother, of the house of his father, saying, Thou hast clothing, be thou a ruler, and let this ruling be under thy hand. And in that day shall he swear, saying, I will not be a healer for my house. It's neither bread nor clothing, make me not a ruler over the people. Here's my notes and my thoughts. The neighbor shall oppress over them. If there's a big earthquake or terrible famine, who do people go to for food? They go to their families and neighbors. Same with political ideas being oppressed by their neighbors. They go to their families and neighbors who they feel comfortable and safe with. The Babylonian Empire will be capturing Israel in that day, verses 6-7. The brother shall be asking his neighbor, help us and be a leader. The neighbor will say, I am not a healer and will not provide bread and clothing to you. I will not be a ruler. So in these days, their neighbors are going to be like, get away from me. This is my house. You do your own thing. You're on your own. Sorry, I can't help you. And so another thing from Josephus he saw back in his day was this is what happened during the first abomination of desolation, which happened in 70 AD. For if so much as the shadow of any kind of food did anywhere appear a war was commenced presently, and the dearest friend fell abiding one with another about it, snatching from each other the most miserable supports of life. Nor would men believe that those who were dying had no food, but the robbers would search when they were expiring, lest any one should have concealed food in their bosoms, and counterfeited, dying. Nay, these robbers gaped for want and ran about, stumbling and staggering along like mad dogs, and the doors of the house like drunken men, and they would also in the great distress. They were in the very same houses, 2 or 3 and 1 and the same day. So we see people were just going around houses stealing. Like, how can you trust your family and neighbors? They were just on their own. They got their houses boarded up. They're like, you know what? You guys do your own thing. And this very much could happen in the last days. Like, a lot of these could be dual fulfilled prophecies, not just happening back when Israel was captured, but it can also happen again here before the Lord comes again. And so that's kind of Isaiah verses 5 through 7. Now we're going to move on to 8 through 11. For Jerusalem is ruined, and Judah is fallen, because their tongue and their doings are against the Lord, to provoke the eyes of his glory. So, in that first verse, you already see these people just want to provoke the Lord. They are happy with their actions, and their actions are not in line with the Lord. The show of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded the evil unto themselves. Say ye to the righteous that it shall be well with them, for they shall eat the fruit of their doings. Woe unto the wicked, it shall be ill with him, for the reward of his hand shall be given him. There's a couple phrases I want to go through in this verses. This has a lot of talkings. This is the reason why the Lord is going to send children to replace the wicked and the skilled and the powerful people. So the very first phrase, Jerusalem is ruined and Judah is fallen. So back in the days, Israel was a very strong kingdom, and at the time of Isaiah's writings, people were shocked to hear of its destructions. When Isaiah wrote these words, people were like, are you kidding me? Israel's not going to get destroyed. What are you talking about, Isaiah? You're too silly, man. But we learned that eventually Assyria tried to capture Israel, but they failed in their conquest, and we'll read about that. That's a very powerful story. And Babylonians did it in 587 BC, and the Romans did so in 70 AD. And in the last days, a Gentile nation will capture Israel. And this is an example of the multiple applications of the following verses that happen to Israel each time they do so by rejoicing in sin. Kind of what I was talking is a dual fulfillment prophecy or multiple fulfillment prophecies. We see every time Israel and Judah becomes wicked, they get captured again. Yeah, they did so twice. The time that Assyrians tried to capture them, they repented and came unto the Lord. Therefore, they were not captured. But the other 2 times, they kept sinning, kept going with their actions. And then in verse 9, the shew of their countenance doth witness against them. There's this story in Helaman in the Book of Mormon, chapter 9, 33 through 34. There's this guy who went and killed the judge, and they were like, who did this? Like, this prophet prophesied of it, therefore he killed the judge. But the prophet was like, no, I didn't. If you go to his brother's house and then look at his cloak, and then you'll see blood on it, and then you'll notice that he'll go pale, and then he'll feel guilty, and you'll know that he's the one who did it. And so these guys were like, okay, they run over to his house, and everything happens. They see his cloak, there's blood on it, he goes as pale. And this verse I have in here kind of describes it. Then shall he tremble, and shall look pale, even as if death had come upon him. And then shall ye say, because of this fear and this paleness which have come over upon your face, behold, we know that thou art guilty. Yeah, having a countenance could go both ways. We could have the countenance of Jesus Christ where we look very bright, happy. And we could have the countenance of the devil where we look guilty, pale, fear, kind of what this man was experiencing, because he know he did something wrong and he's guilty and he committed sin. There was a prophet, David O. McKay, and he said this quote, and I think it goes along with what I just said. Every man and every person who lives in this world wields an influence, whether for good or for evil. It is not what he says alone. It is not alone what he does. It is what he is. Every man, every person radiates what he or she really is. It is what we are and what we radiate that affects the people around us. As individuals, we must think nobler thoughts. We must not encourage vile thoughts or low aspirations. We shall radiate them if we do. If we think noble thoughts, if we encourage and cherish noble aspirations, there will be that radiation when we meet people, especially when we associate with them. Yeah, it's our actions. They definitely take into account our psychological behaviors and how we interact with other people. And if we continue doing sin, if we keep committing, breaking the commandments, we're going to have this evil radiate around us. And that's why if you go around and been around people, you could kind of feel what they have to offer. And sometimes it could be good, sometimes it could be bad. And it's how we do our decisions every day. The next phrase I'm going to talk about is declare the sin as Sodom, they hide it not. I'm going to show a couple of examples, two of them particularly. These are controversial topics, and it can't really be explained in one, like, a 30-minute session. Like, it's more of a sit-down conversation if you guys disagree, but here's the first one. Gay pride movement. These are examples happening in the world today. We know that homosexual behavior is not of the Lord. It's when you act upon it. If you have homosexual feelings, that's okay, but when you act upon those feelings, that's when it breaks the line with the Lord. And these people are in the streets. They're proud to share the sin with everyone. These people have to share their evil, wickedness with those all around them in the city. And they declare the sin as Sodom. They're like, hey, you know what, this is nothing. And they're not hiding it like we can see in the streets. They're openly promoting homosexual behavior, and they want people to act upon it. And that is not happy with the Lord. Like, if you're asked, the Lord is like, are you happy with this movement? He would be like, nope, it's a sin. Like, they shouldn't be doing this kind of stuff. And so this is one example of what Isaiah is saying. Here's another one. This one has to do with abortion. And so they hide it not. There's this movement that happened a while ago. It said #ShallDoAbortion. Yeah, you got like prominent people like Alyssa Milano, and there's this op-ed piece by Nicole on the left, and they were just happy. They just wrote about their experiences. They're like, you know what, I could hide my abortion not. And they go around and calling for women to go around having abortions. They want other people to commit sin and become unhappy. And so these are people who are spiritually depraved, and they keep sinning, and they can't keep it to themselves. They have to shout it to everyone. And these people, they might be depressed, they might be mentally hurt, and they have to share that negativity with others and bring them with them along. And that's one of the themes about Satan, is he is a miserable human being. He is on this earth trying to get people to be miserable like himself, and he feels purpose in life by making others miserable. And he hates it when people do the right things. And these people hate it when people do the right things as well. So they want to encourage others to follow their path. And the wicked people, they are going to envy your white righteousness like Satan is jealous. And they want us to use our bodies for the wrong way, which the Lord gave us as a gift. So this is what the wickedness will do. And don't let them tear you down. Don't let them shame you. Don't let them encourage you to give into these wickedness. Because in Isaiah chapter 5, in the last days, the people are going to call good things bad and bad things good. like, it's going to be confusing in the last days. I'm going to be like, wait a second, I thought that thing was bad like 10 years ago, but now it's okay? Like, what changed? Like, I know the Lord didn't change, but it seems like the culture has changed. And that is what's happening. That's why Isaiah gave us a warning in the first couple of verses. Is like, even though these people are prominent, they're very famous, they're very powerful in their culture, the Lord, compared to the Lord, they're nothing. Like, once Babylonian comes into America, yeah, all these powerful people will become nothing. And that's what the Lord can do. The Lord can make that happen. And then the Lord is going to replace these people with children because they're humble and they can be morphed into wherever the Lord wants them to be morphed into. And so these are just a couple of examples of what Isaiah was talking about, them declaring their sin Sodom, and they hide it not. And so we're going to move on to the next couple of verses, 12 to 15. As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. So again, we see children. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err. So they're talking about the leaders right there. And destroy the way of thy paths. The Lord standeth up to plead, and standeth to judge the people. The Lord will enter into judgment with the ancients of his people, and the princes thereof, for ye have eaten up the vineyard, the spoil of the poor is in your houses. What mean ye, that ye beat my people to pieces, and grind the faces of the poor, saith the Lord God of hosts. So we see the leaders are going to lead us to sin. Like, we can't trust the leaders, even if the President of the United States says that abortions are okay. Like, that still is not okay with God. The only time it ever becomes okay, which probably would never, is if God says it's okay. But even if the leaders tries to change the rules of God, they're not that powerful. They can't. And they will try and promote us to do wickedness, and they want to destroy the path of the Lord. They want us to take a different path back to heaven, but there's no other way for us to get back to heaven unless it's the path that's already stated by God, and that is if we keep his commandments. And so that's just a warning from Isaiah. It's like, hey, be careful those who you choose to listen to. Be careful those who you want to follow, because they might not be leading you down the right path. You got to pick the righteous leaders. And then in 13 to 15, the Lord standeth up to plead. So the Lord wants us back in his presence. The Lord wants us to be happy. The Lord wants us to be righteous. And Micah 6, 2-3, it says, for the Lord hath a controversy with his people, and he will plead with Israel, O my people, what have I done unto thee? And wherein have I wearied thee? Testify against me. Jacob 5:41 in the Book of Mormon. It says, what could I have done more for my vineyard? So we're going to get into the allegory of the vineyard in the next chapter. But the Lord cares about us. The Lord wants us to come back to him. The Lord wants us on the covenant path. He wants us away from the wickedness path. And there's a phrase in the Book of Mormon that says, wickedness was never happiness. And we see that wickedness really destroys our countenance. It really makes us not want to be around those kind of people because of their countenance. And following the Lord gives us a very happy countenance. You could read stories about people experiencing members of the church, and they're like, holy cow, these are very happy people. I wonder why. It's because we're following the path of the Lord. I'm very excited for this next part. Isaiah 3:16. It's wedding day. Is Israel ready for the groom? And so we're to this verse. I'm going to pull it up real quick on my phone, but it's going to talk about this lady. And I want you to, as I read this verse, I want you to think if the Lord wants to marry this girl, and which groom or which bride is Israel more like. And so let me pull it up real quick. And it says, moreover, the Lord saith, because of the daughters of Zion are haughty, walk with stretched forth necks, and wanton eyes, walking in menacing as they go, and making a tingly with their feet. What kind of girl does that sound like? The girl in the red dress or the girl in the white dress? The girl in the red dress has a stiff forked neck. She's very haughty. She's sitting on a throne. When she walks very proudly. And the girl on the right in the white dress, she looks happy. She looks like someone you want to be around. And so that's the question I have for you: is Israel is the girl in the red dress right now? Which one does Jesus want to marry? Is my question to you. And my answer would be the girl in the white dress, the one who's humble, the one who's happy to be around, not the proud, lofty person. And so, we're going to read the next couple of verses. And these verses, a lot of people take them to kind of establish a standard of dress code. That's not what it is. And I'll talk about why the Lord the Lord in Isaiah talks about all these articles of clothing. And it's not because for guys to be like, oh yeah, girls, you have to dress this way, you have to dress that way. Like, let me control your dress code. And so we're going to go ahead and read the next couple of verses. It'll be 17 through 24. Therefore the Lord will smite with a scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will discover their secret parts. And that day the Lord will take away the bravery of their tinkling ornaments about their feet, and their calls, and their round tires like the moon, the chains and the bracelets and the mufflers, the rings and the nose jewels, the changeable suits of appeal, and the mantles of the wimples and the crisp-brain pens, the glasses and the fine linen, and the hoods and the veils. And it shall come to pass that instead of sweet smell there shall be stink, and instead of girdle a rent, and instead of a well-set hair baldness, and instead of a stomacher a girding of sackcloth, and burning instead of beauty. So the idea of Jesus marrying his bride, Israel is his bride, and Israel will be his bride because they are the chosen people by the Lord. But Israel's not ready, and we see that in the last couple chapters. And so in verse 16, why is Israel not ready? It's because they are too confident, and they gain their confidence from the wrong materialistic things. In verse 18, the Lord will take away their bravery, and they will become powerless. And verses 19 to 23, they're all materialistic things that can give the bride the wrong sense of confidence. Like the nose rings, or like makeup, girls go into public, and they cannot go into public without those things because they give them a sense of confidence. But in verse 24, there's a prophecy that's going to happen to these women. Instead of sweet smell, they're going to stink. They will be in rags versus nice. They're going to be bald. Their heads are shaved off. And their stomachers will be burning instead of a beautiful body. And this is a prophecy that's going to come to pass because the scattering of Israel, when Assyrians come in and Babylonians come in, they're going to scatter the Israel. They're going to take them slaves. And these women that are super haughty, super proud, they get their sense from materialistic things. Well, next thing you know, they're slaves. And back in the days when the Babylonians took them slaves, they shaved their heads. They're stink. They're not going to be able to take a shower back in those times as being slaves. And they're going to have to work hard. And they're going to be in rags. They're not going to have nice clothing. And so this is what happens when we get proud and haughty. And this is a warning to all of us. Like, hey, don't look to materialistic things. Look to spiritual things from God. And that's kind of the theme of this chapter. And so the question I have for you is, what gives me my sense of identity? You could think about this question. You could be like, okay, I am a research assistant. This is what gives me my sense of identity. You got to think twice, because the real sense of identity is being a son or daughter of God. And there's a really cool video. It's by Elder Uchtdorf. It's called Our True Identity, and it's about the ugly duckling. And this video talks a lot about self-identity. And so in chapter 3 is why the bride isn't ready. And then the next chapter, in chapter 4, we're going to talk about who the bride will be. Like, Jesus is going to marry the bride, and it's got to be ready. So in the next chapter, we're going to talk about why. But the last two verses, 25 to 26, I'll just go ahead and read it. Thy men shall fall by the sword, and thy mighty in the war. And her gates shall lament and mourn, and shall be desolate, and shall sit upon the ground. So these haughty women, they're sitting on the throne right now, and the theme is the Lord is gonna get them to sit on the ground. And that's what happens when we become haughty, we become proud, we trust in the flesh of our arms versus the flesh of God. And the men are going to fall in battle. They can't protect these girls, and so they have to go into slavery by the Babylonians, and that's what we see happen in history. But the same thing could happen in today's time. It's not just a once prophecy and it's already been fulfilled. It's a cycle. It could happen. If we fall into the cycle, this is what's going to happen to us. And so that's this chapter 3 for you guys, and I really love this chapter. It had so much content, so much knowledge for us. We just got to be careful about what we do, about who we follow, and what we do in this life. And it gives us a couple of examples. And so there you guys go, chapter 3. Join back with me for chapter 4. I'm really excited to talk about that one with you guys, and hope you guys have a great day.